Hello, 10th grade. So greetings from Morristown. I am just going to go over a couple of things for you all today. I know that some of you all, actually a lot of you all are at home as well. Some of you all are going to be in the classroom watching this. So I'm going to go over some things for really both classes. Today's going to be very similar, and then I'll be doing different videos for each class the rest of the time as we kind of split off into our college prep and honors groups. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you all. What I have done is I've actually posted this first slide as a daily overview in Canvas in the place where I normally put the weekly overview um, link. So it's on that home page there if you want to look at this and use it as a checklist for what we're doing today. Um, so our Let me go ahead and get this part going. So our new book that we're starting today is A Tale of Two Cities. So you should have a copy of that. If for some reason you don't have a copy yet, there are actually free online versions that can tide you over until you get your hard copy, and they're legal. This is a book that's in the public domain, so Project Gutenberg is a good place to go and look for an online version if you need it. The formatting isn't great, but it will tide you over for what you need. And these are short chapters to start off with, so it shouldn't be too rough on your eyes. Um, so I've got a reading schedule that I have put in our Tale of Two Cities module, so you will want to download that if you're not on campus to receive a physical copy, or you'll just want to make sure that you save it and that you're checking that regularly. Um, then we have the intro and book guided notes that I've put in there as well. We're going to actually start going over those in this video. So if you haven't already, you may want to pause the video for right now and go find those guided notes. And you can either download them and fill them out digitally if you use the Word version. So there's a Word version and a PDF version, because I know different people have different needs. You can, if you can't print off the whole thing, just make sure you can view them and just fill in on notebook paper, and you can label the chapters. That's fine. The great thing about this video is you can pause me, whereas you can't do that normally in class. Um, you can also just print them out for yourself and fill them out normally as well. So I also have put in the Life and Times research paper module a Word document and a PDF document version of the basic MLA guide. So that's from our English department. It's how we format our bibliographies and Works Cited, which I'll be saying a little bit more about here in a few minutes. So to do today, you're going to just watch this video, follow along with the guided notes for A Tale of Two Cities. Go ahead and do the first exercise we normally do in our vocabulary, so vocabulary unit 6. I'm going to have to grab my book. I have my literature books, but not my vocabulary books, so I can't give you a page number right now. But if you'll do the choosing the right word for that, that would be great. And we will check that on Wednesday. So if you don't do it today, do it tomorrow. It won't take you that long. Do make sure that you read chapters 1 and 3 and do the guided notes for A Tale of Two Cities. And we will go over those notes tomorrow, or actually Wednesday, sorry, because tomorrow I've got the computer lab for you guys. So I'm going to give that as a research day, and we'll go over the reading for tomorrow and today. So today's reading, sorry, and tomorrow's reading, we'll go over those on Wednesday. So technically you've got 2 days to do the 2 readings, and I'm not going to check up with you guys till Wednesday on that. So college prep guys, you guys have a paragraph to brainstorm for today. You will be writing that paragraph on Wednesday, so you do have some flex time as to when you're going to make sure that you finish that and get that done. Again, this is in the daily overview on the homepage of our Canvas website. So Yeah, you'll want to pick one of these two. I realize we've read Milton and Pope together, and I assigned Swift Gulliver's Travels this past Friday, so we've not gotten to talk about it yet. If you're confident, go ahead and pick the second option here, where you talk about Rape of the Lock and Gulliver's Travels. But if you're not confident or you haven't read yet, then you'll want to go with the first option there. But those are placed in Canvas on that daily overview. Honors, you've already brainstormed your paragraph, so I'm going to have you write that paragraph today. What you'll do, so obviously this is a little different in terms of time, but just time yourself. How long does it take you to write that paragraph and record your time? And so we'll work on the time management of that part a little differently. So if you're like, you know what, this took me 10 minutes to write, or this took me 17 minutes to write, I just want you to write down how long it takes you to write that paragraph. And you'll turn that in via Canvas. There's an assignment there already for that. And it's actually there for college prep too. So technically you guys could do that a little early. You would just time yourself as well. Okay, so this week, some major things to know. Computer lab research time is tomorrow, so I'm not going to do a video because I want to give you max time on that. So if you're on campus, you will go with the sub to the computer lab, same one as last time. You will be on your honor to work really hard on finding your sources, and then if you're at home, take advantage of that time to make sure you're doing your research. So. If you have questions about your research, you can email me, but right now we're in the exploratory phase. We haven't even developed a thesis yet. So you'll notice on your deadlines that comes a little bit later. You are, since you're older, you are getting to kind of develop your own topic within the topic. So for example, if I were doing Dorothy L. Sayers, you know, I've read this biography on her. I'm not asking you to go read a whole biography, but I'm not going to cover as much as Barbara Reynolds here. Okay, what I'm going to do is maybe give a brief overview of her life, but I'm going to provide, you know, something that Barbara Reynolds may focus on in a chapter or two, and that's going to be the most of my paper. So here there are a couple of chapters on some of her detective fiction, and that may be what I focus on the most. I may not get to focus on her you know, different relationships she was in, or her marriage, or her son. I may not get to focus on her connection with the Inklings, or what she said about, you know, the Christian imagination. I may just focus on her detective fiction and kind of mention those other things. And that's okay because I'm just writing a paper. I'm not writing a full book. So what you may want to do is for your book source, use that to kind of help you as you look through the table of contents and the chapters there and say, okay, which part of this person's life that is a chapter or two or three in this book, what, you know, that might help you narrow down your focus there. So that's just an idea. Your book source does not have to necessarily be a biography for them. Another book that I have, this one's actually Mr. Bundy's. I borrowed it because I wanted to save money. But Dorothy L. Sayers, she wrote two essays. One, Are Women Human? She's not a feminist. She made them mad. And she probably made anti-feminists mad too. But anyway, so I could pull from, you know, those essays if needed, if that related to my topic. Or her book, The Mind of the Maker, that is where she talks about the Christian imagination. Obviously, I'm not giving a summary of the whole book. I just may, you know, briefly summarize her idea, pick a really great quote from her book and use that. Or, you know, since I mentioned the detective fiction, I've got some of her detective fiction's books. So I may, you know, if I've read one of those or a selection from one of those, I may use that to help me write my paper. So with books, you've got a lot of options. I was lucky with my person that I picked because I already have books for them. And I know you probably wouldn't want to hear about Lewis or Tolkien one more time. But again, you can use ebooks if you need to, because with the big Rona, as Mr. Anderson calls it may be harder to access a physical copy of a book. But remember, most of this is going to be online sources anyway. Play around, kind of see what information you can find about them, especially in those databases. All right. So let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and look at A Tale of Two Cities. All right, so today's a little bit longer because I'm gearing things up for you all. So with Charles Dickens, um, here he is and all of his greatness. I actually met Charles Dickens when I was 5 years old. Um, I remember it's Christmas time, and I had these stuffed, I could actually dig it up right now, but I'm not going to, these stuffed Muppets from, like Gonzo and all those guys, and Gonzo was my favorite. And so I also watched a Muppet Christmas Carol for the first time when I was 5 years old, and I remember eating Crunchberry cereal and watching it, and since Gonzo was my favorite and he was Charles Dickens, we automatically had a connection. So as I got older, it wasn't until I was a teenager that I read A Christmas Carol, which I think you guys read in seventh grade. And to be honest, the first time I read it, I was like, this isn't as good as the Muppet movie. Um, but I eventually grew to like the actual book. Sometimes you just got to grow into things. And then when I was in 10th grade, my mom made me read not A Tale of Two Cities, but Great Expectations. And I really liked it. And I started reading Dickens novels and appreciating them more. And then I read Tale of Two Cities when I was in 11th or 12th grade, I think, um, just on the side, and really, really powerful book. Um, yeah. So people have had different reactions to this book, A Tale of Two Cities. Um, I have A Tale of Two Men very quickly. So, I remember working with Mr. Holland at my old school back in the day, and Mr. Bundy was there, and so happened to have the same lunch period, and Mr. Holland sits down and he goes, y'all ever read A Tale of Two Cities? And Mr. Bunny and I were like, oh yeah, that's so great. And he's like, what is up with the dude and his chocolate? And you all will understand that when you get later on in the book. But needless to say, Charles Dickens can describe something very, very small for like 15 pages. And for someone with Mr. Holland's personality, some of you may relate to this. He's like, give it to me, let's go. Mr. Bundy's reaction was totally different. I asked him about the book, and he was like, "I cried so hard," at the end there. So I mean, it does have a great point. So with Charles Dickens' childhood, he was born February 7th of 1812. So remember War of 1812 with the United States. Dickens was born that year in February in Landport, England. So again, we're still reading British authors. His family parents were John and Elizabeth, and he had 7 siblings. So he was one of 8. So if you think I have a big family, he has me beat. He was the oldest boy, but he was the second oldest child, and that does come into play, both of those roles, in how he grew up. So, all right, education and poverty. So his mom actually taught him at home. That was kind of a common thing when they were little. His mama taught him Latin when he was like, 3 and 4 years old. And that was just kind of, to be educated meant that you knew Latin, especially at a young age. She taught him how to read and all of kind of the basics of math and things like that. And then the siblings, the way they would entertain themselves is they would put on theatrical productions for fun. So if, I know Miss Keys is really big on having you all do like video projects and things like that. That was kind of their way of entertaining themselves, only they didn't have iPhones to record themselves. He would then go to a dame school, which is where you would have a young woman teach a room full of small children. And then he didn't get to go further than that. Now, in some ways, it's like he didn't have as great of an education as a lot of people in his day. But at the same time, he probably was taught a whole lot more than most people now are taught by, 8 years old. So poverty, his dad, unfortunately, this wasn't one of those situations, where dad's working his rear end off and trying to feed the family and they just can't make ends meet. This was one where dad was irresponsible. He really liked parties and appearances and things, looking a certain way. And so he would overspend and try to impress people. He liked nice clothes, nice food, lots of socialization. That got the family into a lot of trouble. So much so that dad had to go to debtor's prison. And this is really going to influence Dickens' writing. So if this may sound a little funny to you all, but the idea was if you couldn't pay your debts, you'd go to prison until you paid them off. but you can't work while you're in prison, so that's kind of a problem. So, dad's going to debtor's prison, and mom and the kids, they don't have anywhere else to go, so they're going to go hang out with dad while Charles Dickens tries to support the family. So he's 12 years old, and he goes to another city to work in a blacking factory. So blacking was a lot of what they would put on, their pots and pans and things like that to polish them. And his job was for like 10 hours a day or more, was to sit there and put the labels on the blacking bottles. And terrible conditions for children to be working in. Again, it was like 10 plus hours a day, and he did not get to go to school. And yeah, he wasn't with his family. Now, after his dad was released from prison, his mom was like, we still need that financial security, so we still need you to work because you're the oldest boy. Okay. Now, Charles really wanted to go to school. He really had other things he wanted to pursue, like writing and things like that. But they wanted him to work. His sister, Fanny, she was a year older than him. His parents supported her musical education and career. So she was the oldest, and she got to go to school, and they paid for her to go and all of those things while he was supposed to hold down the fort. So he does eventually get to return to school. He convinces his dad to let him to return to school. And he did, I think, go to night school for a little while. But then his dad was still overspending, so he was evicted. That means kicked out of their house. Dickens has got to go back to work. With jobs, Dickens wasn't just the kid that worked in the blacking factory. He also worked as a clerk. So, Bob Cratchit's job in A Tale of Two Cities, Dickens knows what that's like. He was also a court reporter, so he will have a lot of legal talk and courtroom scenes in his book. And he was able to, draw from real life experience, even if he didn't, not necessarily the stories, but just kind of the culture and how that worked. And he developed his own shorthand, even. So before text messaging was a thing, Charles Dickens was inventing his own shorthand. He was also a writer. He wrote for newspapers. He did freelance work, and he wrote novels. And so the development of the novel's kind of a really cool thing that we'll talk about here in a little bit. Yes, now we're going to get to his personal life and romance. There's some great things and some terrible things. Great writer, horrible dad and husband in some ways. Other ways, he was a great dad and husband. So the first girl that he really liked, her name was Maria Beadnell, but her family was like, no, he's not high class enough for you. So they ended up not being able to be together. So number 2 was Catherine Hogarth. That's the woman he married. And they actually had 10 children. Okay, so tons and tons of kids. And yeah, I think there's a letters to his children that have been published. There's some mixed things here. He could be very affectionate with his children, and he could also be just downright selfish. I've read some biographies on him, and especially his letters to his wife. It's like, yeah, okay, it's all about you, bud. So anyway, but they were married for a long time, and then he really loved theater as well. And while he was at the theater, he met a woman who was quite a bit younger than him, and they ended up having an affair. And he and his wife, he divorced her, or separated from her, at least. So his interests, again, were theater. He would actually write plays and have them performed in his house and have his children play different roles, gather friends and things like that. He was also involved in public theater. Charity, that was another big thing. So he didn't just reflect it in his writing, but because he was able to make money and manage his finances, he would give a lot of money to help people. One of the things that he really helped with was a home for homeless women called the Shepherd's Bush. It was run by an older woman, but he really helped with kind of the financial end of that and working with her. And this was to help women who had been on the street, to be able to not just have a place to stay, but to be able to have jobs and maybe get married and have families, because these were women who were maybe just begging in the streets, maybe they were prostitutes. So they're not just giving them room and board, but they were giving them life skills of, how to keep house, how to manage finances, how to, here's some work that you can do that, you still get to keep your dignity, to be able to take care of yourself. And a lot of those women, would go on to be successful. So he died June 9th of 1870. So my mom was born in 1970, and that's the year Sesame Street came out. So this was 100 years before that, 5 years after the Civil War, just to kind of put that in perspective for you guys. He died of a stroke, and he left a mystery novel unfinished called The Mystery of Edwin Drood, and it was right at the point when they are getting ready to figure out who did it. And he didn't leave any notes saying who did it. So the mystery died with him. Right, these are some other things that he wrote, really popular. So really neat quote that was shared with me. We need to read Dickens novels because they tell us in the grandest way possible why we are what we are. So with the Victorian era, I'm going to go over this with you guys on Wednesday because I know I've had a lot of things to say to you all today. So we'll go over the Victorian era, and we will go over the first couple chapters of A Tale of Two Cities. So if you have any questions, just let me know, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.